You are listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding. I'm a hoarder who needed an outlet to talk about this unusual and isolating mental illness. And because my hoarding is secret, I started this podcast to talk about it. Subscribe to the podcast and find my social media links, episode transcripts, and every link that I mention at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. Finally, I am not a doctor, I'm just a hoarder doing her best. So do seek professional support if and when you need it. Hey, how are you? I am good. I always want to say I am good, thank you, as if you've asked me back, so I imagine you did. I'm good, thank you. This week is an event in the podcasting world called Podcasthon, which for a thing that podcasters are to talk about with their voices is quite hard to pronounce. It is Podcasthon week, and I'm really happy to be participating in this year's Podcasthon. For a week every year, podcasts highlight a charity, and today I am talking about a mental health charity in the UK called Mind. The idea behind Podcasthon is that podcasts dedicate an episode of their show to a charity to raise awareness of their work. And because every podcaster who's taking part is doing it this week, it creates just a really nice community effort of awareness raising for people who are doing good things. And so Mind is, as I said, a mental health charity. And I am going to play the audio of a video for you to get an idea of the kind of work that Mind does. Now, there is one sentence in it that is in Welsh. I will translate that for you afterwards. Have a listen to what Mind is all about.
We're facing a mental health emergency.
Anxiety and depression are on the rise.
Waiting lists are far too long.
And an underfunded mental health system is failing those most in need.
We won't stand by and watch. We're Mind, and we are here to fight for mental health.
We're here to change minds.
Breaking down barriers.
Campaigning to improve services.
Taclo'r anghyfiawnder sy'n gwneud bywyd yn anoddach i rai ohonom sydd â problemau iechyd y feddwl.
We're here to support minds.
Listening.
Providing information and life-changing support.
Speaking out for a generation of young people that are dealing with an uncertain future.
We're here to connect minds.
Sharing knowledge and ideas.
Empowering voices that are too often ignored.
Bringing together people who care about mental health to make a difference.
We're passionate, determined,
And unstoppable.
We're Mind, and we're here to fight for mental health.
Now, the sentence that was in Welsh, I wish I spoke Welsh, but I don't. However, I found out a translation for you. The bit that was in Welsh translates to English as tackling the injustices which make life harder for those of us with mental health problems. Now, that's just a little bit of what Mind do. I will link in the show notes at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk to the website at Mind where you can find out more about what they're up to. And I will also link to their donation page if you are drawn to donating to them. However, mostly this is an awareness raising exercise. So now you know a little bit more about Mind than maybe you did a couple of minutes ago. So today I'm talking about cause and effect. I had a long drive last week. Well, I say a long drive. I kept thinking of a quote I heard a few months ago that said, Europeans think 100 miles is a long way. Americans think 100 years is a long time. And I was thinking of that on this long drive last week because I was driving about 100 miles to a town with a castle that was built in the 1100s. It felt very apt. Anyway, I was doing this long drive and I had a playlist on, and every song that came on this playlist was brilliant. Every song was firing me up. I was getting excited at the end of a song to see what the next one would be. And it would be like, oh, this is from when I was a teenager. Oh, this one is like a gay club in the 90s. This one I associate with that friend. This one makes me laugh. And every song was making me so happy. And I was getting like almost euphoric at how good the songs were that were accompanying my drive. And then I had this realization. I did that. I made that playlist. That is an excellent playlist that is perfect for me and for this drive because I put it together to be an excellent playlist specifically for driving. That is a playlist that has existed in different forms for about a year, and I am constantly adding to it, taking away from it. I add songs that make me happy. I add songs with good associations. I remove songs if they start to get a bit blah. And I realised that I was having such a good time with such a good playlist because I had made that playlist. It wasn't pure chance. This wasn't the radio giving me banger after banger. This was my work paying off. Now that is fun work. Making a playlist is a fun thing. But still, stuff I had been doing on and off over months all came together in the perfect playlist for a 100-mile drive. And it got me thinking about cause and effect. It got me thinking about what causes good things in our lives and what causes bad things in our lives. And thinking about how past experiences can lead to current difficulties, for sure. I feel like that defines my life in many ways. But also how the actions we take also create our future, create the outcomes we face. So when we've worked hard on something or even done a small positive thing, that can lead to better things in exactly the same way as incredibly hard things can lead to difficulties and pain. I want to think about this in hoarding terms, not in a way that blames or shames us, but in a way that helps us to understand what we're doing and what that's leading to, and what we can take control of and what that's leading to, as well as the things we can't control. So hoarding disorder isn't something that happens overnight. It's something that tends to develop over years and years and years. Often in the past of somebody with hoarding disorder, there are difficult things. There might be trauma, there might be loss, there might be grief. There might be other difficult things. There probably are. There might have been experiences of scarcity in our lives. There might be experience of abuse. We might have lost somebody important to us or people who are important to us. There might be other underlying things like depression or chronic pain or disability or anxiety or any number of other ongoing challenges. Those things often co-occur. And we combine that with some of us have difficulty making decisions. Some of us have difficulty categorizing things with executive functioning. Some of us have unusual beliefs about how much value an object holds. Some of us have unusual attachments and place unusual significance on objects. A lot of us live with a lot of fear. Some of us have difficulty processing information. A lot of us are overwhelmed and confused. We don't know how to deal with the situation we've ended up in. There's a kind of snowball effect, and suddenly we're drowning in snow, and how on earth do we get out of it? For a lot of us, the behaviours that were kind of initially a way of coping are now just are normal. They're really entrenched. As spaces get more cluttered, it's a lot more difficult to tidy them and to live in them and to address the problems. And then we might start avoiding dealing with it at all, which then reinforces and makes everything worse again. And there's all these different pieces in this big jigsaw puzzle of our life that can leave us in a position where we live in chaos, or we live a very small life because there is no space to stretch out. And all of those are things that have led us to this point. And my this point will look a bit different to your this point. But we can start looking at those threads and what has got us to this place. And it's rarely one thing. Maybe we grew up in a hoarded home and we never learnt how to be different. We never learnt how else to live. Maybe we didn't, but we had other things, and there was something about our mind or our brain or our personality that led us to this place. It's generally not a happy place to be. We're not living like this because we think it's brilliant, generally. We're living like this because of 100 different things that happened in a particular way or in a particular order, and now we're here. And it's hard to be neutral in any way about some of these things. When I try to look at what's got me to this point, sometimes I can be quite neutral about it. Sometimes I'm very sad about it. Sometimes I'm angry about it. Sometimes I'm bitter, so bitter about it. Sometimes it's a whole lot of things. Other times I can remember, okay, that was hard, but those are the people who got me through it. Sometimes I can say that was so hard, but I got myself through it. But when I can achieve some neutrality about it and look with a bit of distance, okay, that fits into the puzzle there. And I probably do that because of this. It can be a really helpful thing to work out. It can be quite liberating to realise, oh, there is a reason for that weird thing I do. Okay, that explains that. And that's hard, especially if you're thinking of somebody who caused you harm or something that really damaged you. And I'm not saying we have to be neutral about these things, but in this context, when trying to look at cause and effect, I find it easier to make those connections sometimes if I'm not in that deep emotional pain about something. And I find that if I can understand, okay, that happened and then that happened and that happened, and then that combined with my existing tendency to this, and maybe that's how I'm here, it can help me be a bit less judgmental about myself. Because where I am now is where I am now, for right or wrong. Of course, there are things I could have done differently, but that's no use to me now. So looking at where I am now, with as little judgment and as much self-compassion as I can muster, is also a really helpful thing, because it helps me to see that while hoarding behaviours are not the best way of dealing with some of the things that life has thrown at me, they are a kind of, if you squint, understandable way. They've served a purpose in my life, and they were what my brain came up with to cope. I don't like that. I don't appreciate that. But this, in one way of looking at it, is that it is a coping mechanism, even if it's not necessarily objectively the best coping mechanism. I didn't set out to live in an uncomfortably full home that was unwieldy and unmanageable and that I couldn't invite friends over to. That was never the goal, but it's where I am. And having some understanding of that and some compassion for myself, and in particular for how I ended up here, feels like a helpful thing. And if we can hold on to some of that objectivity, it can help to keep that in mind and assess our current situation. What are our spaces like in our home? How much moving around can we do? How often can we find the things we're looking for? How often do we have to ignore something that needs repairing? How often do we trip? What effect is it having on our life? Do we say, I wouldn't invite friends over anyway, but we're not entirely sure we mean that? And what impact does it have on our self-esteem? What impact does it have on how we feel about ourselves, on the things we say to ourselves and the things we believe about ourselves? Does it leave us more isolated than we would be if we had a home that looked more like other people's? Does it affect our relationships? Does it affect our finances? And these are difficult questions. We don't really want to answer them. And holding on to that objectivity and that slight distance from the emotion can be so valuable when we're asking ourselves these questions, because we don't want the answers to these questions to contribute to a shame spiral or feeling even more overwhelmed than we did in the first place. And we don't want that shame spiral or that overwhelm to then make us acquire more things or make us hold on to and save more things. It's hard to look at this stuff honestly. It takes guts to look at this stuff honestly. And it takes guts to start trying to make those connections, those cause and effect connections. Because I know for me, if I start looking at that hard thing that happened to me, led me to a place where I do behaviours I'm not proud of, I then have to start thinking, so did the people who hurt me have a similar story? And I can't get close to the compassion I need. I can't summon that compassion for people who hurt me. That currently for me is too much. But what I can do is try and at least summon that compassion for myself. For whatever reason, I was hurt. And because life is fragile, I've been bereaved too many times. And because of the way my brain is set up, and because of a period of poverty, and because of 1,000 other things, I'm here now in a mess. And this is what the mess looks like, and this is how it's affecting me. And there's a story there. There were causes that combined with circumstances that led to an effect. Did you know that I run de-hoarding accountability Zoom sessions twice a month? We get together, cameras off if you prefer, each with a de-hoarding goal, and we get on with our own tasks while chatting. They're really friendly, and it's so refreshing to be able to talk with others who face the same problem. Grab a ticket for the next one at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/ticket. And those causes are powerful. They have made tangible differences to my lives in a whole range of ways. But what that means, as well as understanding myself better and my situation better, what that means is that what I do next can also make a tangible difference in what my life's like tomorrow or next year or in 10 years. Because just as 100 pieces of the jigsaw got me to where I am today, I'm still adding to that jigsaw, and it's going to look different still in time. And so just like the epic driving playlist, I can make choices that can be big choices or little choices that can mean that on another day, things are so much better. Things are maybe not perfect, but so much more how I want them to be, so much more nourishing to me, so much more set up in a way that suits me and how I want to be. I saw a meme years ago that said something like, when you watch a film about time travel, like Back to the Future or something, there's so much emphasis on, if I do the slightest thing, it could change the entirety of the future of the planet. But we never think that something little we do today could change our entire future or somebody else's entire future. And I think about that a lot. If someone in a film goes in the wrong direction, the entire future of humanity might change. But we don't think that if we're nice to a lady who seems really sad in the cafe, that could change her entire day, which could then change how she treats other people, which could then really cheer someone up who really needs cheering up. And they could then go on to do something wonderful that could change the future of humanity. It's not just when we go back in time that we can change how things turn out. And I've talked a lot on this podcast about habits and sustainable change and doing things on an ongoing basis as much as or instead of big dramatic actions once in a while. And it is true that the small things we do on an ongoing basis tend to be the ones that create change. And it is true that setting goals that are small and achievable can be an incredibly powerful thing. But it is also true that doing anything that gets us closer to where we want to be is better than doing nothing that gets us closer to where we want to be. Maybe creating a new habit and creating sustainable change just feels too big and too impossible and overwhelming and unreachable. But is there one thing you can do? One thing, pick up that pen off the floor, wash up one plate. It might feel inadequate, but you're a pen or a plate better off than you were. And maybe you'll think, well, I've filled the sink up now, I may as well wash another plate while I'm here. Or maybe you won't, but you've still got a clean plate for your tea. Cause and effect doesn't just happen in a bad way. And cause and effect isn't just a matter of how we got here. It's also about how we get to where we're going next. Past actions and past circumstances have led us to where we are now, in a whole range of ways, good and bad and neutral. But in exactly that same way, our actions and behaviours and circumstances now will change where we are next week, next year, next decade. Cause and effect doesn't have to just be a bad thing. It can help us to build a future that looks like where we want it. We accumulated stuff gradually in most circumstances. Not every circumstance, I do know, but mostly we didn't end up with a very full house overnight. And sorting out our house can be just as gradual. We accumulated gradually. We're probably going to declutter gradually. But if we don't take action, that also has an effect. Or if things get worse, that also has an effect. Buying one additional piece of nonsense in the supermarket has an effect. And again, this is not for self-recrimination and this is not for shame. That's not why it's important to think this way. Because shame and self-recrimination also cause an effect. But thinking of what might seem like a really minor decision or behaviour or action in a context of, but if I keep doing this particular thing, where will I be? And judging whether that's where we want to be or not can be a useful way of looking at this situation, because problematic behaviours compound, but also positive behaviours compound. And sometimes that looks like doing 3 hours a day of decluttering and making stunning progress. And sometimes that looks like washing one plate, not bringing home a cardboard box, not picking up a chair from the side of the road, not opening Amazon because we're bored or we're tired. Understanding the connection between our past and our present can help us to understand how we got here, can help us to recognise some of our triggers, can help us to recognise some of where we really struggle. But understanding the connection between what we do today and where we end up in the future is also a really important conversation to have with ourselves, with our therapist, with our friends, with whoever, with our journal. And I don't know if that's a helpful way for you to look at it, but it's a helpful way for me to look at it. It's taking responsibility and it's being accountable, but without the additional shame and with additional understanding and compassion for myself for how I ended up here that goes far beyond, I am so stupid to have ended up here. Because it's not that simple. It's never that simple.
It's top tip time.
My top tip this week is to give yourself a break from heavy stuff. There is, I don't know if you've noticed, a lot going on in the world at the moment. And a lot of it is complex, heavy, difficult stuff. And I'm normally the kind of person who is on top of the news. I'm on top of politics. I'm on top of what's going on in the world. And then sometimes I hit a point where I cannot. And then I feel guilty. I feel like I should be on top of the news and I should be on top of politics. And I feel like I'm a terrible citizen for not being informed, but I just cannot. And sometimes, which is where I am at the moment, I then can't even read or consume heavy anything. I can't read a book that deals with difficult themes. I can't listen to podcasts about difficult topics, even if they're unrelated to what's going on in the world. And then I feel even worse because that's not the kind of person I want to be. I do read heavy things. I do consume difficult stuff. My top tip this week, if you're in that place as well, it's fine to not listen to the news for a bit. It's fine to read easy, light things. It's fine to listen exclusively to comedy and mental health podcasts. All of that is fine. Sometimes we need it. We don't need to be constantly aware that the world is a difficult place at the moment. And we're not a terrible citizen if sometimes we can't stay on top of it. Finally, I want to remind you that this episode is part of Podcasthon. Do find out more about Podcasthon, first of all, about podcasthon.org. Again, I will put the link in the show notes because I could tell you now it has one T, but you'll question yourself when you're typing it into the browser. You can find out other podcasts that have also done a Podcasthon episode. Again, I will link to the Mind website in the show notes, so do head over there as well to find out more about it. Okay, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you for listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on board. You can find all the links I've mentioned and a transcript of the episode online at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. To find out more about how you can support this podcast and the overall project, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support and do subscribe to the podcast so you make sure you don't miss any future episodes. There may be links in this podcast that earn me money. This doesn't come at any extra cost to you if you make a purchase through those links, and it helps to support the podcast.